When we put this thing together, the main thing I was looking for was people who were part of GLF, who were really there, who were legitimate, as everybody at the panel are. We had some miscommunications, and some people didn't get the word in time, and there was a little problem in that way. One of the people who was every bit as important and every bit a part of that first year is sitting in the audience, and I'm going to give him the microphone and ask him. You got a chair for him? Okay. So we're going to let Jim speak, Jim Farad, and then we'll get to the conversation.
Thank you, Jerry. It's unbelievable to have listened to all of you, because all of us have fought with each other, and yet all of us sort of told the same story of what brought us together and what we remember, and I think that that's just remarkable. And looking at these pictures, which you guys haven't seen, but it's unbelievable the people, some of whom are gone, that are in the pictures. But I just want to very briefly not repeat, hopefully, anything that's been said, but add some of the things that I think have not been said yet. And that was I was inspired by Carl Whitman's Gay Manifesto, which came out in 1966. Carl Whitman was a member of SDS and had worked with Tom Hayden, and he had written this polemic piece called The Gay Manifesto in 1965, and it was published. And I remember reading that when I was a part of the bohemian, underground, very gay and lesbian culture that existed in Greenwich Village and in the art world and culture world of New York City. It was not above ground. Young people today have no idea what it was like back then. We had a very vibrant, underground, bohemian culture, and that included many different kinds of people, but at its core were gay and lesbian people and gay and lesbian people of color. Some of those people had been active at one point or another in the homophile movement or the early beginning days of the lesbian movement. The thing and Marty Robinson, who four people have mentioned, Marty Robinson was my boyfriend in 1965, 1966, and I met him in the balcony of a 42nd Street movie theater. That's when there were movie theaters on 42nd Street, and one of the places that we would go and cruise, those older guys in the room will remember, very safely, by the way, wasn't dangerous, were these movie theaters, and they're just a part of New York that doesn't exist anymore, and that's unfortunate. But there are two things I want to say about GLF that I think need to be part of the discourse. Consciousness raising has been raised, and a couple of people have talked about it, and Perry very articulately talked about it. But I think it's one of the signatures of GLF, and it's one of the things that distinguished among the members of GLF, particularly the men. The lesbians gave the men this tool called consciousness raising, which they had brought from the emerging women's liberation movement. And a lot of men did not want to be in consciousness-raising groups. And in GLF, you did not have to be in something you didn't want to be. But for those of us who did do consciousness-raising, the multi-issue politics of GLF became very real to us. And what Steve Dansky referenced about the woman-identified woman, and Dansky had written a piece about the gay male, we asked ourselves, what does it mean to be a homosexual? What does it mean to be gay? What does this identity mean? Is it just a reaction to oppression? We knew we were sexualized. We were hypersexualized. That's the one thing that the culture allowed us to do as long as we didn't do it in front of them. But for the rest of our personhood was separate from that sort of just branded as sexuality. So in those consciousness-raising groups, we began to look at what does it actually mean to be homosexual, and how much of the old definition do we want to keep, and how much do we want to throw out the window so we can be free of oppression. Out of that consciousness-raising also came, that's the same phone. It's a very popular guy. And out of that consciousness raising for the men came an understanding of feminism. And I think you heard a thread up here that feminism was very much a part of the early gay liberation front. Not everyone, there was misogyny from a lot of the gay men, but there were, Ellen, by the way, not all the men were opposed to the women having a dance. Just want to put that into the record, because you said the men, and that happens a lot, the men or the women. Another thing I want to make clear, because it's one of the myths that is wrong. We were a very diverse-looking group of people. Some of us were academics, some of us, Lois Hart came out of the nunnery.
Lois.
Yeah. But we had people who were street people, Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson, two drag queens at the time. Sylvia used to get up and say, my name is Sylvia Ray Rivera. And there were some of the more educated lesbians in the room who were very offended by Sylvia's presentation of herself as a drag queen. But they did not dominate. They got to say their piece, but there were other women like Marty Steffens, who was a passing woman who had been given the keys to the men's room at the large building that she was the janitor in, a large business building. And her highest point in her life, she said, until she came to the Gay Liberation Movement, was the day they gave her the keys to the men's room. And she presented herself very much as what we at the time was called passing woman, would be called a bull dyke by people who were less sensitive or homophobic. And through the process of consciousness raising, one day Marty, I hope someone else remembers this besides me, came to the meeting. She got involved with a woman named Brenda Howard.
I remember Brenda.
And she got up and she said, sort of, you know, like most butches, you know, basically butches are shy and the femmes, and let me tell you, being a femme, always get to be in control of most of the scenes. The butchers just sort of stand aside and, you know, give support. But Marty got up and said, I would like you to call me Martha, because I am beginning to understand that it's all right to be a woman and to be who I am. That is the power of gay liberation. That is the power of the community of people that were in gay liberation. We had cells. Cells were based upon the original Madison Society's idea. Harry Hay had been a communist and a labor organizer, and the Communist Party in the 30s and 40s had cells. Now, I don't want to frighten anybody here. We were not communists. The communists didn't like gay people, so we couldn't be communists, you know. And the conservatives didn't like gay people, and the church people didn't like gay people. We had to find out who we are and have our own community. But we appropriated the idea of cells so that anyone who came to that meeting could find a place that they felt comfortable in. Some people wanted to do dances. People like me wanted to talk politics and, you know, and actions and that sort of thing. Some people wanted to do the Come Out, the publication. Some people wanted to work with gay youth, as Mark sort of described how that happened. Sylvia and Marsha with Bob Kohler organized STAR. And the first gay and lesbian community center is not in this building. It was on 3rd Street. Above Gordy's Folks, across the street, I think, from Gordy's Fork State. Anyway, it was upstairs on the downtown side on the 3rd floor. Well, when Marsha and Sylvia realized that there was a space that they could sleep in, STAR took over that floor pretty much. But that was the first attempt. So these kinds of models that we set in motion, which maybe not all the time succeeded, but we began to inspire the imagination of people that came after it, that this was possible. That NYU sit-in, as John talked about, was actually an occupation. We got in and we didn't leave for 6 nights, and it was pretty scary. And Sylvia and Marsha, again, found a place that they could spend the night, and they were very much, and I don't want to diminish it in that sense, they were very much a part of the discourse. Gay Flames, very typical of GLF. Gay Flames was in reaction to Come Out. It wasn't radical enough. And spin art who was a member, developed this sort of street paper called Gay Flames, and that's where that first picture of I am your worst nightmare, I am your best dream, that was the cover of one of the Gay Flames. And so all this creative energy and political discourse was going on within GLF. Ron Ballard, we decided, I don't remember who we was, but I think we was Consensus. By the way, we did work on Consensus. And it made it impossible for some of the GAA people that left to go to GAA. The meetings were endless because everyone got to speak until you couldn't speak again, and that's what that bat was about. You couldn't speak again until everyone else had had a chance to speak. And for someone like me who was used to being able to speak, it was very difficult to have to wait to everyone else. And many voices had never learned how to speak up. This is the power of gay liberation. People had to learn how to say something or say pass, you know, just something. We had a little talisman. It was based upon the Native American sort of group circle consensus things. And it could drive you crazy if you had an agenda that you wanted passed that night. But that's how it was done. The chairperson, by the way, people will say, I was the chairperson of GLF for such and such a time. Well, let me tell you, the way the chairperson was picked was everyone put their name in a hat and it was pulled out. That was the way it was done. And that was to deal with patriarchal ideas of leadership and male privilege. We were co-gendered. Now correct me if I have this wrong, Fran and Ellen, but as I remember, we used to always, even if there were only 2 women in the room, one of those 2 women would be on whatever committee we were on, or would be asked to be on, or be tried to be on that committee, because we wanted to share the power within the organization. The misogyny of the men was very strong. Misogyny of the men was very strong. We were men, we were gay men, but we had been socialized as men in a misogynistic culture. And eventually, when the women left to find radical lesbians and Lavender Menace. It was done, and I remember, I think it was Lois, or maybe Jill Johnson, who had started coming to our meeting. She said, we don't hate you guys, we love women. We want to be with women, you know, it was like, and some of those bonds remained over the years, even with separatism was very much a part of the political and cultural women's movement. There were still these bonds between some of the men that were in GLF and some of the women that had gone on to organize women. Single issue versus multi-issues. We were a multi-issue organization, and a lot of the reasons we were multi-issues because we were so diverse. Recently we had a Bob Kohler memorial here, which was quite wonderful, but Bob sort of forgot that we actually took part in the demonstrations for the Young Lords when they occupied a church uptown. And Sylvia Rivera, being Puerto Rican, was very much a part of that, going uptown and being in that demonstration. We were in the demonstrations openly as gay men and lesbians for Black Panthers. Were we always accepted? No, we were not. We had, what was new with that? The left, by the way, was as homophobic. The new and the old left was as homophobic as the right wing. So we learned very early on that we were entitled to be wherever we wanted to be, and we were ready to say, get over it, or whatever words that were. Perry's telling me I have to keep quiet now. I just want to close with the Come Out poster. We had decided the critical organizing tool that we would use was to call people to come out. Fran has it here. Was to come out. We realized that the most powerful bond of oppression was that which we held within us, which was the shame that we held inside of us. Later it was called internalized homophobia, but the power of the family, the power of the church, the power of the society to make us feel less than and hide ourselves. So Come Out was our rallying cry. It was the name of our publication. And the poster, we, for 3 meetings, announced we're going to meet at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning in what was now Soho. it was Little Italy at the time, and we're going to take this picture. And everybody said, we're going to come, we're going to come, we're going to come. Well, you'll see who came. Very few, all white, the women up in front. And we have been accused of being racist, and then sometimes people have actually put heads of people of color in that photograph out of being politically correct. But let me tell you what the real sad story was. I remember Ron Ballard, who was a black member, gay man of Gay Liberation Front. He said, I wanted so much to be in that picture. I wanted so much to be in that picture. And I got up that morning and I was terrified that my family would know, that where I would work I would know, that I couldn't get myself to go there. Kiyoshi Kiwamura, who was an Asian American gay man, he, from Philadelphia, he also wanted to come, but he was afraid. And this is what young people, thank God, do not have to go through the way we did. The amount of courage it took. Some still do. I'm not diminishing it. Some still do. I'm just saying at this particular moment in New York City, for it to stand up openly, smiling, running, and saying, we are lesbian, we are gay men, come out, come out, come out and join us, was an act of tremendous courage.
Thank you, John.